Always had that something in you where you wanted to strive for better. So describe for me, what has your journey been like in life?
The journey it's been very hard because, I was on public assistance, so it was like, at first it was a boundary there. Anybody knows about public assistance, they don't want you to go so far or they're going to cut it off.
Describe yourself now. Tell me, who's Freddie Stevenson, the man that you are now?
A few years ago, I remember in college, they would always have speakers come in and ask us who we are. I wouldn't have been able to answer the question. It probably would have had something to do with football. I'm a fullback for Florida State. I want to play in the NFL. But now it's just simple. I'm Freddie Stevenson, man of purpose.
This is a passion of mine. The whole premise behind the Jazzie Conversations with Jazz podcast is to spotlight the fact that it is now time for you to get your dope comeback story.
Hey, say Jazzie Conversations with Jazz. Jazzie Conversations with Jazz. Say Jazzie Conversations with Jazz. Jazzie Conversations with Jazz.
Every Monday, I call people into a studio and we dig into their comeback stories, because I know that we see people in their glory and we see people when they're on top, when they can have that silver lining to them, but we all go through some things, right? We all go through some things, and I think once we're real with people and we let people know the trials and tribulations that we've gone through, it only makes us human and it connects one of us.
So I just want to know, what would be your advice to someone who is looking to start their own podcast?
First and foremost, let me back up. Find your voice. What are you going to talk about? Is it something that people want to listen to? How long will your podcast be? What's going to be the consistency of your podcast? Are you going to do it like weekly, daily? Are you going to do it monthly? So once you find that, because that's going to indicate if somebody wants to listen to your podcast or not. I do know how I'm doing it. I'm doing it with God. I'm doing it because this is a passion of mine. And when you are passionate about something, you're not going to stop. So it really it comes down to how bad do you want it. Listen, it definitely comes down to how bad you want it. Are you passionate about it? Are you going to go after that thing? And so I know for one that I am a person that will do that. And so you know who I am. I am Jasmar Jazz Bennett. I am your host of the Jazzie Conversations with Jazz podcast. This podcast celebrates the power of the comeback. I truly believe that you can come back from anything with God, using the right resources effectively, and your willingness to do the necessary work. It is a fantastic Monday, October 27th. And so October 27th. I got my days. Do I have my days mixed up? I am still coming down from my birthday celebration, okay? So it is in fact October 27th today, right? We are 12 days, not 1, not 2, not 3, 12 days away from the most entertaining, informative, exciting, inspirational, motivational live podcast show here in Central Florida. All right. The Jazzie Conversations with Jazz podcast is turning 4. And so for that celebration, we are bringing a live podcast experience like no other here right in Lakeland, Florida at Catapult Lakeland. Tickets are available on eventbrite.com. I will give you a little secret because I've had several people reach out for tickets. And so I still have a special, but it will not last long. Okay. So tap in. I still have a special going on for my general admission tickets. General admission tickets, a select few general admission tickets have been brought back for 2 for 1. So for 2 tickets, you will only pay the price of one. Now, with taxes and fees and all of that on eventbrite.com, it comes out to around $45, between $45 and $47, right? That's a steal for the show that you are about to get. Now, VIP, unofficially, is sold out, all right? So, general admission tickets are still available for you. This is going to be an event like no other, okay? This event is bringing not one, not two, not but 3 different panels. My first panel is going to be comprised of Miss Tia Crockett, Miss Sylvia Stevenson, and also Miss Lisa Sunshine. They are going to come to you with the topic of God. How do we use God in the formula to make a comeback? How important is it? They use God every day in their everyday lives, in their businesses, and they are thriving in their own arenas. We're going to focus on forgiveness because a lot of us need to forgive, right? Forgiveness is very important. Panel 2 is comprised of my special panelists who are going to talk to you about using the resources, the right resources effectively. For that panel, we have none other than Miss Markeisha Smith. We also have Tarika Coney, and we will have Norman Harris on that panel. And then for panel 3, we are going to talk to panelists who can teach you and tell you how to do the necessary work. That is the formula for the comeback story. On that panel, I have Mr. Garen Sprav. I also have Sierra Range and Mr. Michael Mariner. But I didn't stop there. I did not stop at 3 panels. Aside and along with those 3 panels, I also have vendors for you. Yes, I will have food vendors there for you. Trust me, we have delectable food, and I will be announcing who those food vendors are this week. We have a mixer, especially for my vendors from noon to 1 p.m. That is your vendor shopping, that is your entertainment, that is the live DJ, that is your networking hour. And then we move into the 3 different panels. At the end, we will have an R&B day party. I have DJ Kim Blaze on the 1s and 2s, and I also have J Rod. Listen, MC, listen. DJ J Rod, the MC, is going to be performing. And I just added a performance. I will have a live saxophonist, right? We have Mr. Steven Satsy Stevens is going to be in the building, and he is going to be playing us the latest and greatest R&B tunes. We're actually going to take it back as well. Remember, tickets are available on eventbrite.com. I bring this event to you live every single year because I want you to be in the building in a live setting where you're able to network and talk and ask questions to my panelists, and you're able to really experience what you need to. So it is going to be an amazing time. Get your tickets today. All right. And so I really am excited about tonight's episode because, as you know, and as you have been following me, you know that I am definitely a daddy's girl, right? You also know that this podcast was brought about by me following my dreams of becoming a radio personality, having my own show. You know, I have a degree in broadcast journalism from Florida A&M University. And I always talk to you guys about me losing my father was the start of me charging myself to go back after the dream that I had, because he used resources to make sure that I was at NABJ conferences and just did what he could to make sure that all of his children had what they needed. And so, to pay homage to him, I started chasing this dream again. And so that's why we are here. Okay. My special guest is someone who knows all about fatherhood, the absence of having a father, and how he has lived a fantastic life in spite of. And so I want to introduce to you Mr. Barry O. Franklin Sr. He's a storyteller, he's a husband, he's a father, he's a man of faith that in his life embodies resilience and also redemption. Now, he was raised in Brooklyn without knowing his father. Barry learned early that absence can leave questions that echo for decades. Guided by a strong mother and a close knit family and the grace of God, he chose a path of service. First, as an EMT, where he met people at the most fragile moments of their lives, and later to investigative work, where patience, compassion, and courage mattered as much as any skill. His mentor, through my father's absence, his memoir, Through My Father's Absence, The Making of a Man, traces that journey. The boy who longed to be seen, the young man shaped by first love and loss, the protector devoted to his community, and the father determined to break cycles and build legacy. Barry speaks directly to men about responsibility, caring for children, honoring women, and standing for what's right, even when it's costly. He also equips family and faith communities to walk with those carrying father wounds. Whether he's sharing stories from the field or moments at the family table, Barry's message is clear. Forgiveness is strength, love is a choice, and purpose is built day by day. And so, without further ado, I'm bringing my special guest on the screen. Hello, Mr. Franklin Sr. How are you?
I'm okay. God is good.
Isn't he?
Yes,
Like
he is.
truly and sincerely, he really is good. He really is good. So how are you doing this evening, sir?
A little bit tired, but I'm here. I'm here. You
You said,
know.
if you guys are just tuning in, I see that Austin Butler has checked in. Listen, Austin is someone who works with a group that is a proponent of great fathers. He works with an organization called Team Dad, and he also works with Dad Mode. And so they go around and they teach different skills. They actually have cohorts and classes to teach men how to father. So I'm so glad that you are tuned in, Austin. And so I'm glad I will see you at the podcast event as well. Mr. Barry, I feel like I should have invited you to be a panelist. You came out of the gate in your bio talking about forgiveness, you know?
Well, hey, I'm sure I can talk to my publicist and get it done.
I'm sure you
You
can
got me
pack.
on a busy schedule. You know,
Yes, yes, yes.
just trying to promote this book.
Yeah.
Um, so
Yeah,
I'm ready
we
for
got
you.
you here. I want to find out about you first. And so Brooklyn has always been one of those places on my a bucket list of wanting to go to. And so if you had to describe Brooklyn, first of all, how long, I know you were born in Brooklyn, but how long did you actually live in Brooklyn?
For 18 years.
And if you
Basically,
uh-huh,
yeah, for 18 years. And then my mother moved us to Far Rockaway, so in
gotcha.
Queens.
What do
So
you
grew up in.
what do you remember
Mhm.
about what do you remember about Brooklyn that at that time?
Okay, so I'm a child in the '60s. So what I remember basically, is that my mother had me at 19 years old, and she lived with at a certain period during her teenage life. She lived with her grandmother, who was my great grandmother, and I always call her grandma. So
Yeah.
when they migrated from Birmingham, Alabama, up
Okay.
north, they lived in Brooklyn. They lived on Fulton Street. So at that time, my mother had me. Then 2 years later, she had my brother, who's no longer with us. He passed in 2003.
Mhm.
Um, she moved to Hertford Street, which was like right around the block from where they were on Fulton Street.
Mhm.
And I met, a whole bunch of friends that I still have to this day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I remember, being out there in the street and stuff. You had the neighbors watching you and stuff, so
Yeah.
you couldn't do no wrong, and stuff. As they say, it takes a village to raise a child.
Yes, it does.
We had we did our chores, and then we couldn't go outside to play until the chores were over with. But I remember playing in the street, playing Man, hide and seek,
Mm,
tag, Coco Livio, Red Rover,
yeah,
playing football in the streets and stuff, you know,
right.
and just, a lot of things were happening at that time in Brooklyn. Um, you know, uh, we had an elementary school right down the block from us,
Okay.
right? But they busted me out. I had to
Okay.
go, if anybody's familiar with Brooklyn, I had to
Mhm.
go walk all the way to Atlantic Avenue and Ralph Avenue to catch a school bus. And that
Goodness.
school bus took us about an hour. It's up to going to Midwood district of Brooklyn. So
Mhm.
basically predominantly white neighborhood.
Mhm.
So went to PS 99. I think I had a good education, got a good, assembly of, about different people, different races and everything like that. Um, and later on, I ended up going to Midwood High School, which was
Mhm.
still in the same area. That was a good experience. Some friends are still around. Some friends that unfortunately, seem like the older you get, more people pass away.
Yeah.
But it was a good experience. You
Good.
know.
Good.
So
I feel like I don't know, I feel like going to Brooklyn, the air is different. I think eclectic. I think art filled. I just feel like I smell it. It just for me when I think of Brooklyn, when I see pictures, when I hear people talk about it, it just feels like a family reunion. So how often do you ever go back?
last time I went to Brooklyn, I guess just in passing, because like I
Yeah.
said, mostly everybody's grown up. Some are still there. Matter of
Mhm.
fact, they have a reunion because I kept in touch with one of my good friends that I knew
Okay.
since I was like 3 years old.
Yes.
And they have a reunion where everybody that lived on Hertford Street, they get together and, just, have a good time. So we
Yeah.
talk about, things that we did, pictures that we shared, just the people who still live around there, who owns the houses and everything. And we just talk about, just different things that happen.
Yeah.
It was like, the boys, they all hanged out and
Yeah.
everything. Some look skinny, some look fat, and, not fat, just,
We all
gained
change.
some weight and everything.
We
I ain't gonna
all
say fat, but just gained some weight. But
yes.
it was an experience. More so as I got older and, worked as a, New York City EMS, which was
Mhm.
separate than the fire department at the time. I would go through, coming from Kings County Hospital, I would cut through Herkimer Street and just see some people. But
Yes.
that was back 1985 or
Yeah.
so, like that. So I'm telling my age, but eh, you know,
Listen, I
but
have sisters that are your age, so you're good.
yeah, okay, you know. But it was a good experience.
Good.
So you know, I so, hey,
I was
but
looking
it's
at just looking at your bio though, and I
mm-hmm,
it just reads public servant. And
okay.
whenever I see someone who has such an extensive career in that field, I'm led to ask, why do you think you were so attracted to being a community servant?
Well, this was okay. Growing up, I always wanted to be a doctor.
Okay.
Okay, so after I graduated from Midwood, I had choices and stuff.
Mm,
I ended up getting accepted to Fordham University in the Bronx, City College, Northwestern College and stuff. And I think
mhm.
if I knew more about the HBCUs at the time, I probably would have went, to HBCU, especially
Okay.
since I had family in Alabama,
Yeah.
and I would have went back that way because then you always had the security.
Yes. Yeah.
But I think at the time, I
Mhm.
went straight from high school to Fordham University. I didn't stay on campus, but at that time, I didn't even have to pay for college,
Okay.
because everything was covered. Because you had
Awesome.
all types of programs. You didn't have to
Mhm.
take out a student loan. You didn't have to ask. They didn't ask at the time. Your family income.
Right.
But I think I was having too much fun. So, you know, so as you go, life just leads you different ways and stuff.
Yeah.
Um, so I always took, either went to college You
Mm-hmm.
know, you took civil service exams because at the time, you know, in New York, you take every civil service exam you could, and it was free. They didn't charge you for anything.
Okay.
Not like today. Now they charge you maybe $100 for this, $100 for that. And I said, okay, never wanted to be a police officer, but I took the test. You know, I took what? New York State Police exam. I
Okay.
took New York City exam. I took 2 back-to-back exams because just in case you didn't get called on one, you get
Mm-hmm.
called on the other.
Mm-hmm.
I took corrections. The only reason I took corrections was because I was wondering why a friend of mine was failing the test. And
Yeah.
so I took it. I got scored a 98 on that test. They called me right away. I said, yeah, I want corrections and everything.
Yeah.
So the thing at the time with EMS, I was a emergency medical technician because I worked for a private ambulance company.
Mm-hmm.
And a friend of mine, I was in his wedding party, and he met a chief, and he told him about me.
Uh-huh.
Prior to that, I had an application in there because it was not by a civil service exam. It was like application, and they pulled my application. I got a call, and then it was history from there. But besides taking New York City police tests and stuff, I took Nassau County too.
Okay.
I took that in '87, but I was already I was just coming from EMS to going into New York City Police Academy. I didn't
Okay.
go into that until like '89. So it
Okay.
kind of just fell into me, and I like what I was doing, I guess, especially from EMS, because we
Yeah.
worked closely with the cops in Brooklyn, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah. So do you
but
feel like that side of you that wanted to be a doctor, do you feel like that was fulfilled through your work with EMS?
I think so. I think so. I still, got that taste for it.
Yeah.
And the thing that was so funny, the only thing, and I worked in EMS when AIDS first came out, the AIDS epidemic first came out.
Gotcha.
And we didn't know what to wear. We were wearing, anti-contamination gear and everything else, and we didn't know how to handle it, like basically the whole world really didn't know how to handle
Right.
it. So we had to do all precautions because I would say like this. I worked in East New York section of Brooklyn, Brownsville section of Brooklyn. And there were times, especially in the summertime and stuff like that, you would go somewhere and you may have like 4 people shot on a block.
Right.
And you had to go in there, banish them up, call the paramedics, whatever, and take them to the hospitals, take them to a trauma center.
Yeah.
So we were more there to help. So we weren't a threat to anybody, not like when they saw, the police, they were like, okay,
Right.
like that. And I could remember coming home at night because I worked till 4 to 12. I could come home at night and driving out of Brooklyn, going back to Queens and everything, and hear gunshots. So just popping up in the air and stuff like that. But
Yeah.
that was the type of atmosphere it was.
Wow. Wow. So just listening to you and listening to your reading your bio,
Mhm.
in EMS work, you've done some detective work. I'm afraid,
Mhm.
if I ever like just met someone who was a detective, because I just feel like, you would just know everything, right? And so I'm just always intrigued by people who are like detectives. I'm like, what you don't found out about me being on this podcast? Like, you gave the
Well,
green light. Some
we,
detective
we,
work.
we, we had our sources. I can't let out too many secrets and stuff, but we had our sources, you
Well, I'm
know,
glad. I am so
you
glad
know.
that I passed the test. Okay. So I, throughout your journey,
Mhm.
I, throughout your journey, it leads up to where you are now, and of course, that's how the journey of life evolves. Like that's how the journey of life is. And so, your bio speaks of having a strong mother. And my God, there are plenty of days where I have to just label myself as being strong,
Mhm.
and your book is um really what I want to get into. And I know it has a lot to do with your comeback story, but you did a
Yes.
memoir. And so this
Yes.
memoir is really a detailed trajectory of your life, but your life specifically living through the absence of your father, but then it talks about
Hmm.
the making of a man, so for so many single women out there who are raising our boys, or raising boys in the absence of their father, that whole notion of, will I be able to foster him into the type of man that I want him to become? And what we don't have a lot of the times is the perspective from the child. And so, you being a man and have made yourself into the man that you want to be, and I'm sure that you're ever growing into him, you have that perspective, you have that lens of what it felt like as a young boy, maturing into a man. And so, is that what you consider to be your comeback story? In
Yeah, I definitely consider that my comeback story because, growing up, and it's hard when you don't know that other piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, was your dad
My
ever around?
mother, hmm?
Was your dad ever around?
No, and
Okay.
I can't say it was his fault,
Mhm.
and stuff. I guess some people growing up in the South back then and
Yeah.
everything. They she didn't even tell like my grandparents or anything like that. Grandparents, or mother, or anybody who my dad was. So
Wow.
basically, nobody in the family immediately knew.
Hmm.
Um, and as a kid, you go to school and you see other kids with talk about their fathers, and then you kind of lie saying, oh, well, my dad is such and such, because I guess the embarrassment or the shame that you didn't know who he was.
Yeah.
um I did have some strong men in my life, uncles, grandfathers, and everything like that, but that question was always there, and she never really gave me an answer, I guess not till I was like 19.
Wow.
And the thing about it was, and she never told me why, you know. So that bothered me. Um,
What would she
my
say? If
brother,
you don't mind, Mr. Franklin, what would she say?
she wouldn't say anything. She just, at that time, what I don't know, they used to have like different type of reunions, school reunions.
Yeah.
So they would go to different states and stuff. So one time it was going to Chicago, and she says, "You're going to meet your father because he lives in Chicago." I was like, "Oh yeah," and stuff. And in my mind, I'm saying, "Well, why all this time now?
Yeah.
You're coming with that." There was no explanation.
Yeah.
My mother was a difficult person at times and everything.
Yeah.
Because they believe in old school. The old school, I tell you, old school is if they get you with some of that stuff from old school, I could have locked them up nowadays and stuff like that. Old
Yeah.
school.
Yes. Yes.
And when we went there, he wasn't there. He was, I guess, down in Alabama. Um, so the journey, I guess, it was still in my mind as an adult and
Yeah.
everything. And later on, after when I go into my first marriage and stuff, I found out I'm doing a little speed ahead a little bit, but I
Mhm.
found out that he passed away in 1988.
Wow. Okay.
So, so that was hard,
Yeah.
finding out that. Um, and as we go into the journey, I always said, okay, be my father's not around or whatever the circumstances were and everything. Because even some of my relatives to today, they go, I thought your mother told you. I said, no, she never told me. And then they
Wow.
go, oh, she lied to me. Stuff. But like I
Mhm.
said, she's not here to answer that no more because
Right.
she's gone and everything.
I
But
would I would imagine that in 1988, if he passed away in 1988, because you said that you did do some digging, this was a time where you said in 1985, though you were um, going through Brooklyn, still going to see some of your, former classmates. So this is when you are an adult, and I would
mhm,
assume what I'm picturing in my brain is that you would go full throttle into finding out, who that other side of you is. And so when you
yeah,
discovered that he'd passed away, how did you find out that information? And have you ever
okay.
connected with any of
This
your?
is this is what happened with that.
Okay.
So my first wife, Annie, we had, she was from Alabama. She grew up in Alabama. So she lived in Birmingham. So we took a trip down to Birmingham, and somebody had said, well, the person that raised your father is alive. And they took me to the house. And so go to his house, met my great uncle who raised my father. And he said to me, he says, you know what? He says, your grandmother's still alive. I said, she is. And he took me over to the house, right? Soon as that woman, my grandmother, Gladys Williams, saw me, the first thing she yelled was Jimmy, because my father's name is Jimmy Bailey. And so, and she said, Jimmy, she said, and she accepted me, opened up with open arms to me. That was a moment, that I could not describe.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It opened up a whole bunch of doors to like all the other relatives on my father's side.
Yes.
And everything. And what was so funny about it, during the summers, we would go down to Birmingham, and I remember what my great grandmother said. Yeah, we better watch out who you date and stuff that might be related to you and stuff.
They love to say that.
Yeah. I'm like, okay, and stuff, and I have met my aunts my same age. I have a whole bunch of cousins. I got my love for jazz, for blues from one of my uncles.
Yeah.
And everything. And I love all types of music, rap, whatever. Love all types of music. But I got more a love for, for the blues from them. And I'm saying, man, all this stuff I was missing, I could have grown up with these people, and that was like another missing piece, but that piece came together,
Did they ever know about you? Did they ever know about you?
No, never did. Gotcha. But it was a pure acceptance, and everything. Because I guess back in their times, everybody was having kids, whatever, and stuff like that. But it was acceptance, and not for just me, but for other people in the family and stuff like that. And I developed a relationship with my grandmother and stuff until she passed away. She passed away in 2016. Okay. So it was, oh man, it was a beautiful thing. So she told me some things about my father, and I was saying, well, did he ever, love me or whatever? And she says, no, that, circumstances that kept you from seeing him. And somehow they had a baby picture of me. I didn't even know that.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I met my other sister. I have a sister that I was born on the 22nd of June. She was born July 3rd, same year. So, and we had an older one that was the year before.
Yeah.
So 2 other brothers. And so, other sister, all a bunch of nieces and nephews and everything else. And the thing about it is, I could have been in their lives during times that everybody was going through some, terrible times or whatever, good times and the bad times, and maybe being able to lend some advice to them or just listen, have a, opening ear. So my sister, I was laughing because I used to say it to her, well, come down and, come along out, I'll pay for you to come. Oh, can't come, like that and stuff. And we always talked on the phone, but guess when I finally met her face to face, when I went to the first reunion in 23.
Oh my.
And everything, met her and it was like, we just talking. I met some of my nieces and nephews, they're like, hey, uncle, like that. And that was an experience, that was experience by itself. But I would say, that little, at a certain age, like even at 63, that little boy in me was still saying why, questioning and everything, So, and then I noticed too, I guess that, it's like a big family, it's just like so much love. When I went to the reunion this year, it was in Mississippi. right?
Okay.
Lowell County, Mississippi.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the first time I ever was in Mississippi. So I got some roots in Mississippi.
Okay.
I remember seeing that movie, Mississippi Burning, and I said, you know, Mississippi.
I'm just telling you, that's all I think about. I'm just like, I've never
You
been,
know,
but yeah,
so,
I understand.
you know, but through my journey, I've been to a whole bunch of places I've never been before. So, hey, you know, my son went to school in West Virginia. I went to West Virginia, Buckhannon, West Virginia. So, you know,
Okay.
so
Okay.
I, you
Yeah.
know, but that's it. So, you know,
So
so
how do you, because you know, a part of your messaging is how essential forgiveness is. I love what stated here. Um in your bio, when you talk about forgiveness, you say forgiveness is strength, love is a choice, and purpose is built day by day. And just
mhm,
listening to you, um this is how I know God just he has his hands on, and he has his hands in a lot of things. Because when I was reading your bio, I a part of my comeback formula is that you have to have God. You have to seek him first. Like, you
yes,
know, to come out of your storm, but to go through your successes, your valleys and your mountaintops as well. Like God has to be in everything. And so
mhm,
I didn't just want to focus on just God. I wanted to focus on the power of forgiveness on this first panel during my live podcast anniversary show, right? And so here
mhm,
it is. I see it in your bio where you talk about forgiveness being strength. And so I'm listening to you throughout this story, and I am trying to put myself in your position, and I would have so much of a missing space. I would have so much of built up feelings. I don't want to say anger. I because well, I may want to say anger or being
okay,
upset or um just thinking, you know, life may have been unfair when it comes to not being able to know who my father was. If I've asked, and I could have, you know, reunited and reconnected with family. And then as you grow older, I think you sometimes give grace to people who you have those feelings towards, especially like you said, back in the day or during their time, because they just were raised differently. And then you never know
yeah,
what someone went through. And the magical word in that is giving and extending grace. But we are all human, right? And so when it
yes,
comes to forgiveness, I find myself going in and out of it, in and out of
mhm,
it. And it's just like I
mhm,
know forgiveness is the right thing to do, but I can't help that I still feel these things. And
mhm.
so how did your feelings, what were your feelings for your mother through it during this time? And then over time,
Well,
how did they change?
I love my mother, but some things you know, like I said, I had certain things that, you know, with relationships, I didn't tell her who I was dating and everything else like that. I didn't really want her to be involved in that, you know, because sometimes she would try to be involved with it, but no, not with me, and stuff
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
You know, the whole thing is, you know, and that's still a phrase from Tyler Perry, you know, where he says, you know, when you forgive somebody and stuff, you forgive them for yourself.
Yeah.
And if you forgive them, you don't bring back that same thing that you forgave a person for. So, you know, I still to this day, maybe she had her reasonings, or maybe out of fear, maybe out of, you know, jealousy that, you know, because he chose the other woman instead of her. I met his wife, and
Okay.
the only thing I could do is just embrace her. You know,
Mm,
give her a hug and just embrace her. You know, and I learned that basically in life, okay, you have to have God first, because if I didn't have God on my side, I couldn't
yeah.
do those jobs I did.
Yeah.
There came some situations that only God had saved me through. You
Mm-hmm.
know, there came some circumstances that, hey, I could have been dead in the grave. I could have been, you know, one time somebody said shoot the cop, and I was the cop,
Mm.
you know,
Yeah.
and everything. So I've worked, like I said, I worked in Queens. I worked 1 year where we had the highest murder rate in the borough of Queens, you know. But I had some good people around me. I have good people that basically, that shared stories that we talked about. And I seen some good, even seen some good in some of the kids that I had to deal with, you know. And I remember, you look at the same kids that was out there on the corner slinging drugs and everything else. And you said, man, if you put that same energy into a legit business, you could go far, because there were some intelligent kids, So, and I seen basically what it was, because if you actually look at it, you have a child that's lost without a parent in their life. And sometimes it comes because either the man or the woman have an argument with each other and everything. And, they don't want the other, the child, him or her in the child's life. That's wrong, because the first love a daughter is going to have is for her dad, and the first love a boy is going to have is for his mom. Is a dad teaches you how to respect a woman, how to be a man, a mom teaches you love and everything. And they say sometimes a man, boy, the first thing they look for in a woman is somebody like their mother,
Have you found that?
I think I had some pretty good women in my life.
Okay.
I think I had some pretty good women in my life,
Yes.
Like I said, some that taught me lessons, some hard ones and some good ones.
Yeah.
And I know tragedy, I lost my first wife and stuff, she had epilepsy. I came home and stuff and found her unconscious and, cardiac arrest. And my two little, two kids were there. And I'm doing CPR on her and everything, and mouth to mouth. And I just said, I can't do it no more. And just because I was in law enforcement, they transported her to the hospital.
Yeah.
And then, 3 years later, I married again. And now I'm dealing with, with my present wife that we've been married now 30 years.
Yeah.
And she has, dementia, Alzheimer's and dementia and everything. And, it's points where she doesn't even know who I am.
Yeah.
And everything. So you come across that. So forgiveness, I learned to forgive no matter what somebody did to me or, try to hurt me. And everybody I ever came into cross and stuff like that, I treated them the way I wanted to be treated. I treated them with respect and stuff. But if I had to be hard, I'll be hard. But but that's it. It's
do you truly believe when it's coming down to forgiveness though, how do you feel about the statement when people say you can forgive a person, but that does not mean that you have to stay connected to that person or you have to even ever talk to that person again? How do you feel about that statement when they say that?
Well, like I said, forgiveness to me is for that person, for myself.
Yeah.
And you can forgive somebody, but you just don't forget what brought you into that situation, because God shows us forgiveness and stuff. So we're trying to be closer to God at times. So we have to forgive, So, you look back and you go like, all that pain and stuff like that I suffered through and stuff like that. And it's hard at times.
It is.
I mean, it's very hard at times. But you just have to learn to forgive.
Yeah. So your memoir, when it's talking about through the absence of your father, but then it's talking about the making of a man, what advice, or what principles, what advice can a young man gain from your book? Because how do you feel that you were able to become a man in the absence of your father?
Well, it was a struggle. And what I'm trying to say to young men is, no matter how sometimes we seem like we are in a deep, dark hole.
Yeah.
And that there's no way out. That don't give up on life. And so, because if you're on the bottom, the only way else is up is up. And so, and sometimes I believe in therapy, plain and simple.
Great,
You know,
good.
old school, they be like, oh, you don't need to talk to nobody, blah, 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 and stuff like that. No, I believe in therapy.
Absolutely.
Because, I had to have 2 hip replacements, and that's because of my child and stuff like that,
Wow.
and going through the stuff with my wife, I had some therapy,
Yeah.
And that was one of the persons that were like, you need to write a book. You got a whole bunch of stories, because it's funny. You could be a cop, you could be EMS, you could be whatever, and people want to know. So what did you ever do? And so when you talk to the young kids at elementary school, do you ever shoot somebody? No, I ain't never shoot nobody. Opportunity came there, but I didn't. And you just have to just talk to somebody. Unfortunately, I had a cousin that I didn't know about, that she took her own life and everything. And it was sad, I've seen people take their lives. I've seen, cops killed. I've been to many police funerals and everything. And, it's bad enough that, sometimes one person does something and everybody else says, oh, they all like that.
Yeah.
But we all not like that. We don't go to work and say we're going to kill somebody today. You just want to come home, and we want to just protect the public and try to do the best job we can. So I was always respectful in everything, where I told somebody, I said, okay, this is the reason I stopped you. And they would wonder why. And I say, okay, let me play the radio. Headquarters, what was the description? And so, and they dealt with that. The history of policing and stuff like that goes back, 18 somethings and stuff like that, where first they were going after slaves and stuff like that, but there's always been corruption. And no matter how much money a person makes, they're still going to be corrupt.
I agree.
But not all people are corrupt.
Yeah.
So, and then some,
it sounds like, do you feel like your career is what taught you how to be a man?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. Because the stuff that I've seen, the stuff that I dealt with, I think that made it. And then having my children too,
I was just about to ask you, what type of father are you? Yeah.
I make mistakes. We all make mistakes, because there's no book on how to be a parent and everything.
I wish it was,
But
I'm pretty sure people have tried to write the book, and I just don't know. It's never going to be a one size fit all, but sometimes you just wish, Lord, just give me.
Yeah, because you got to treat different children different ways.
Yes,
it.
Yes,
is because some of that time out don't work with all the kids. Absolutely. And everything. And dealing with juveniles, when I had to do that as a detective, it was so funny that the parents are afraid of their children. Like, I can't do nothing to them because they call the police.
Right.
And I'm like looking, I said, well, I had to quote something of criminal procedure law. Criminal procedure law said you can do corporate punishment, but you cannot use a weapon. And kids look at me like, oh, you can't? The funny thing is, I had to deal with a 12-year-old. This 12-year-old had a bunch of other kids 16-year-old kids going back in people's backyards and stuff and stealing bikes, right? So, of course, the 16-year-olds, I caught the case. The 16-year-olds, I charged them as adults and stuff at that time. Now, I know the laws have changed in New York and stuff, so, and I had the 12-year-old. The 12-year-old was just coming from family court, and it was a hot summer day. So we have a special room for juveniles and everything. So he's coming there. His mother has a younger daughter and him. And I'm talking to this kid. This kid is slouching down and everything like that. Oh, I'm tired. I said, okay, let me speak in language that you understand. I'm not going to repeat what I said and stuff like that. So he said to his mother, he said, Mom, you going to let this detective talk to me like that? She said, you were disrespected to the detective. So at that time, I took the mother out of the room, and I had another detective come in there and sit with the child. And I said, how when did he start acting this way? She said, when he turned 12 years old. And everything. I said, where's is his father around? No.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so it's like you need, even, even if a child, let them get to know their father, let them get to know their mother, because they'll develop their own opinion later on.
Yeah.
Just let them have that experience.
Yeah.
And if it wasn't for strong men in people's lives, they wouldn't be the way they are.
I I agree. There's so much research that talks about how important a father is in the life of a child, like even from cutting down discipline to
Hmm.
empowering them to do their very best in school,
Hmm.
simply by having proximity, simply by having those conversations with them and being active. And I've always found that research to be very, very interesting. And so I I love men who go through no I love men who would prefer not to make excuses and to stop at nothing to be in the lives of their children. And I've over the years talked to several people who just did not see a way that they could make an impact in the lives of their children because of the relationship that they had with the mother. And I used to
Yes.
always tell them ways around it. I would use like my personal experience. If I'm not with the father of my child, I'm the type of woman that I'm never going to stop him from wanting, or from being able to be there, because you can't make somebody want to be there,
Yeah,
but
that's
you
true.
can definitely not hinder the process of them being there. And so I would just say, I would just give them advice. Like if it were me, this I am a person who welcomes it because I want an active dad.
Hmm.
Money is very important. And even at this point, I'm gonna say it again, money is very important. But
Hmm.
what's really, really important, even over that, not saying that you don't need money, but
Yeah.
what's really more important than that is just the relationship that you forge with your children, because they
Yeah.
need to know that you care. They need to know that they need to see that you will be able to fit them in your schedule. They need to see
Mhm.
that you will go to no ends to make sure that they are fine in academics, in sports, emotionally, spiritually. The man has
Mhm.
a heavy load in the role that he plays in his family. And so I am just a huge proponent, just because I had a great father, and I want that for my two boys as well, regardless of what the relationship with their father is.
Mhm.
And so in your book, I know that you state that you show people um how to be caring. You speak directly to men about being responsible, about caring for their children, honoring women, standing for what's right even when it's costly. How do you do that in your book, or how do you do that in your way of life, in your way of work?
Well, sometimes it gets difficult, you
Yeah.
know, and I've always talked to, like, especially as talk to kids. I didn't care what race and everything else like that. And I said to them like this. I said, first of all, you don't want a cop to know you,
Mm-hmm.
because when they know you, they know exactly where to go. And so, and I
Mm-hmm.
had examples of that, with dealing somebody. Somebody robbed a store, and guess where I went? Right to their mother's house. Said,
Mm-hmm.
you know where your son is and stuff. And I dealt with this child prior and everything. When I dealt with him, he was a little high and he was thinking he didn't want to come and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but looking for him. And then when I saw him, I said, do you remember me?
Yeah.
Oh, you were the detective that came to my mama's house. I said, yeah, and everything. He said, oh, I apologize to you because, I was high at the time, you
Mm-hmm.
know. Um, we have to, we have to get out there and we have to reach out to some of these kids. Some of these kids, and the big brothers and everything, that's fantastic, but we have to see what the problem is and just deal with it. Just try to help them out. Even if it's a complete stranger, take them. Because in the city, I used to, with community policing, where I did part of that, we used to take the kids to, like, baseball games or different other
Okay.
activities.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and just to show them that, yeah, there are some people that want to be in their lives. And I've seen some good men too, that, you know, they might not have been with their child's mother and stuff, and they gave freely. Yeah, this is my child and stuff like this. And they didn't even have to go to court and
Right.
stuff, you know, and they just, you know, gave support and everything. But we just have to be out there to support, you know, our boys, our girls,
Yeah.
and, you know, just try to do the best, you know. And I think about it takes a whole village to raise a child
It
and
does.
everything, especially when I was growing up. You know, we had that little nosy neighbor that told
Yeah.
on you
Yeah.
and gave you a little tap on your butt and stuff like that. Then you got tapped on your butt when your mama got there or something, you know.
Yes.
But,
Yeah.
you know, but I think, I think sometimes we get away from that,
Yeah.
you know, because everybody's worried
It's a
about,
different age. It's a different time. It's a different age. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. But we need more of that.
Yeah.
Is you know, because we got too many children that they start off and they start off as a bad seed and they just go and fester, and then who's going to be taking care of them, you know?
Yeah.
And it's not like it's video games and stuff where you could shoot the thing, or like Bugs Bunny and Wile Coyote and everything, you know, where they blow dynamite and all of a sudden he's back again. It's not like that.
Not like
Once that bullet is fired out the gun, that's it. Life's over, you
Yeah.
know? So I think we all, you know, need to try to help and try to do something, you know?
We have this guest at Cisco 9027 says good discussion on the importance of a father. Can't wait to read the book. And I wanted to ask you, when people read this book, because your second portion to this memoir is the making of a man.
Mhm.
If you had to give a descriptor of what a man is, if you were talking to a young boy, whether it be someone that you've had to deal with in your experience of law enforcement, someone who's lost their way, just someone who's eager, who's a straight A student, but he does not have a father, how would you describe what a man should be to him?
I think that a man should be a person that's a mentor, you know,
Mhm.
that should be there for, you know, even though he's not in that woman's life and everything, but he should be there for that child. Because they're going to have questions. They're going to have a question of what I do this time? What do I do that time? And, you know, sometimes we could tell, you know, kids look at us and say, you know, as parents, oh, but that didn't happen to you. But they don't know we've been there before them,
Yeah.
you know, and no matter what we teach them, they still got to learn for themselves.
Right.
And we hope whatever we instill in a child, that later on that same thing comes back to them,
Right.
you know. Is you know, it's like with my son. I taught him how to do this, cut the grass, and do all this other stuff. You know, to use the snowblower and everything. And
Yeah.
when he came back from when he came like on his visits from college and stuff like that, I didn't even have to say nothing to him. He knew what to do and everything. And your daughters, you know they know what to do, cooking or whatever and stuff like that. I have one daughter that's a chef, you know, and you know, and others that, you know, other business, you know, responsibilities.
Yes.
But we have to be there. Being there might mean more than just anything else.
Right.
You know,
So being
be there,
responsible.
be
Having
honest and stuff.
on it.
You know,
That definitely, yeah.
you know.
Great
So
character. So being honest, being responsible.
mhm.
I'm trying to think of other things like God fearing. I would think that, you know,
Yeah. Well, see, another thing,
a
my
leader.
grandmother raised up in the church, so, you know,
yes,
and
yes,
everything. But
yeah,
you know, but those lessons, that background always comes back. You know, and so, you know, prayer works. You know, and you know, it's funny how something happens, and the first thing we say, thank God.
mhm,
You know, and so, but we get not just have faith, but we got to do the work also. You
mhm,
know, I always say if I could just save one child or one person, then I did a good job.
yes,
It made me feel good that one time when I was still in uniform, this kid came up to me. He says, Officer Franklin, he said, you know, if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't have went to the Marine Corps.
mhm,
And that felt so much joy just thinking that I touched that one child's life,
mhm,
or some other children that I came across and everything. And they did good. And then some that you just lose, you know.
mhm.
I think that's the greatest, that's the hardest feeling to lose one, you
Yeah.
know, is because they have so many, you know, and I think sometimes that's the reason why children get join the gang because they don't have that love at home
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
everything. So they looking for love,
They
you
are.
know. Is so but that's it. So we just have to do our best, and I'm hoping that my story will help somebody else. They always say everybody has a book and everything. Some people may have more than one book, and
Yeah.
you probably gonna see more than one book from me. You know,
Okay.
and so
So just
this,
go ahead. I don't want to cut you off.
so this is I want people to know me as the writer, as an author. I
Yeah.
want them to know that this is the story that I told in my life, that maybe that story that I tell can help you out, that can help somebody else out and everything. So, that's it.
I feel like, your story is one definitely that is very beneficial to tell, to get be able to get the book and to hear your story. But it is a true tale and a true testament of not letting how you grow up dictate the man that you are going to become, and becoming a
Mm,
man in spite of your circumstances and law enforcement and being an EMS, basically being that epicenter of the man that you are to become, in that role of being a servant leader to the community.
mm,
You were exposed yourself to men, who were leaders, men who had substance, who had values, who had morals, who had boundaries,
mm.
and I think that component of your story will resonate, with the audience. And so I wanted to ask you, in closing, one of two things.
Okay.
First, one of the traits, what is one of the traits that you possess as a man that you're most proud of?
My caring for people, not to look at somebody because of their circumstance or where they live at or where they came from, because everybody's not a villain. Everybody's not a crook and stuff like that. And I always tell somebody, even when I had to process them and stuff like that, I have had fights with people and stuff like that. But as I always say, once the handcuffs go on, the fighting stops. I had one person that fought with
Yeah.
me, and so when I got him in the cell to process him, he started crying. He
Hmm.
said, "I had a bad day." And
Yeah.
so I said, "Okay, nothing personal, just business." You
Yeah.
know, but you know, like I say, life's not easy. You
Right.
know, we we can make it that way, but we have to have strong faith and just believe. Don't give up. Don't give up on anything. You
Yeah.
know, some people feel they lose their superpower, but don't lose your superpower. You
Right.
know,
Absolutely
you,
not.
you feel like you got kryptonite coming at you, but no,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, anybody could turn themselves around. I'll give somebody a second chance. Now, when it comes to third chance, now you might just say, okay, but
Listen,
you know,
had I taken
but
your advice, let me stop.
yeah, so as they say, let go, let God. But
Uh-huh. You have to. Uh-huh.
you know,
And so I
but
see that you're currently on Instagram, and definitely, viewers, I want you to make sure you go to that page, you follow him, you subscribe, because his Instagram is at barryo.franklin_books, right? And
mhm.
so how can we purchase your book, sir?
Okay, well, okay, you have my what's it? It's I have a website for books. It's going to be some books are going to be on Amazon, Barnes and Nobles,
Hmm.
Books a Million,
Okay.
and what else? And Walmart. You
Okay,
know.
so you have left no stone unturned. So you're
Mhm,
definitely going to be easy to find. And
mhm.
so The book is called Through My Father's Absence, correct? Through My Father's Absence, The Making of a Man. And so
Making of a detective. Making of a detective.
The Making of a Detective. Got
Mm-hmm.
you. The
Yep.
Making of a Detective. That makes
Yep.
sense now. Makes perfectly good sense now, Barry. Jeez Louise.
But
Okay.
but the whole thing is a making of a man too, is making of the
It
detective.
is. Yeah. Yeah.
And that's it. And it just tells some people, that okay, it's okay to choose some of those civil service jobs because
Yes.
they do have a good pension and
Yeah.
everything, and just be, and one thing I could say to somebody, if you do choose a job like that, treat people the way you want to be treated. And that's one thing I said when I was signing off on the day I retired. And I
Yeah.
said, hey, treat people the way you want to be treated. And then
Absolutely.
you go a long way. And
Do you know
we have a book launching on November 7th.
where's that book launch going to be?
It's called Tap That Beer House in Davenport. It's
Yes,
right
because
in the
we didn't tell them that you are you're in Polk County now. So
uh
so it's
yeah,
gonna
I'm
be
in Polk County. I'm in Polk County.
Davenport.
But we do have some other events, and I'm gonna try to make it to your event too. I got to talk to my publicist about that now and everything
Please
because she
do.
got me a heavy schedule.
I would love for people to be able to see you. It's I feel like it's only right that you do. You have your book launch on the 7th, which is Friday. Come on over
Yeah.
to the your podcast anniversary live show. Bring some books with you. And
Mhm.
network.
And I would like you to come to my book launch on November 7th.
I hope I will have the strength to do that because I would love to meet you in person and come to the book launch. I would love to do that. I definitely
Mhm.
will, all the way in
Okay.
Davenport. I
Well,
definitely
I'll make sure you get the information for it.
yes, please do. Please do. If it's one thing that you can tell me about your work in the field of being a detective, what is
Hmm.
it that a good detective must have? What skill set?
Okay. First of all, common sense.
Yes.
Okay. You have to have common sense.
You said
You have
common
to be
sense.
uh you have to be objective. You have to really get into things, because it's like being a mad scientist. You got to get knowledge of everything that you do. When you're doing the investigation, you got to look at everything. You know, look at look around, look at your surroundings, look at who's around you, look at that person that might look, kind of suspicious and stuff like that. You know, um, the things that happen, like with the domestic violence, or you see in, of course, in many stories, the first thing they look at is the spouse, or in a murder, they look at a spouse and stuff like that. You
But that's
know,
that's like the number one thing. When we look at these criminal shows and these detective shows, everybody always thinks that in your career is the percentage lending itself to that. Like that is typically where it
you know
is.
what it is, and I used to laugh because my wife was saying, "Why are you hollering at the TV?" I said, "Because they're doing it wrong. We wouldn't do it like that." And stuff. I said, first of all, if we got to put a person in the cell, we ain't gonna have a gun on us. You know, and so it's, I mean, it comes to sometimes, like some cases,
Yeah.
man, it's a lot of work.
I
When I first
imagine.
became a detective, the social media they had was MySpace, right?
Oh
And I'm
my
like, it was,
gosh. You
you
just
know,
you really brought some memories back
you
with
know,
my
and they were doing cyberbullying then with MySpace and
yes.
stuff. And I knew I couldn't do too much and stuff. I threatened to lock up a whole high school quick and said, this stuff don't stop and
Oh my
stuff
god.
like that. I'm gonna lock everybody up and it stopped,
Like everybody else. Yeah.
you know, and
Yeah.
everything. And I just tell people, just watch it, because you got fraudsters going out there trying to scam seniors and stuff like that, talking about, oh, I got a family member, you got to get bailed out. Watch that, you know.
Yeah.
But you really, just tell the truth too, please,
Yeah.
you know, and
Yes.
everything, and be more observant of what's around you and everything, especially in these times, you know, whatever
I like
color.
I need to talk to you because this world of dating, I need you to give me some skills, some detective skills. Like where do I need to go
Uh,
first to make sure that
uh,
this is a good person?
yeah, yeah. You got to watch body language. You got to watch gestures. You got to, you know, and so you can
Yeah.
tell when somebody lied. And most of the time, we have our answers before we start talking to you. You
Uh-huh.
know, so
Yes.
that's it.
Yeah.
But you gotta be a good investigator. That's
Yes.
it. And it was
Is it
funny. I
things
had
with
some
the
people that
eyes?
mistake, huh?
Is it things with the eyes true? Like whether you like when a person is talking to you, if they look to the left or they look, what is it? They look to the right, they're lying, or they
They
look to the
look
left.
at different things like body language. Like if somebody's acting more protective, if they're okay, say if the couples together, that's
Yeah.
up, and you can tell when somebody loves each other because if they start going like this and not that closeness, there's something up, going wrong. You look at the eyes, you look at it, if somebody's shaking or something like that, way they talking, if they look like that, or you asking them a question and everything. So it's a whole bunch of things that you have to look at,
Yeah.
different cues. But more than anything, before you start interrogating somebody, you have to, really know what investigate what you're doing and stuff before you do it,
Yeah.
you know. So, but
So what's one of the main cases that you have solved that you're proud of?
okay, well, when I was in uniform and everything, we had this 14-year-old, and we thought he was like I was doing community policing, and we thought the kid was, I thought he was 16 or so. So my partner, she ran. I'm seeing her grabbing him, rushing him out of the store, but they call it a bodega. We call it grocery store, but it was a bodega. Is that
Yeah.
right? And I'm like, what the world? I got out of the van, we grabbed him and stuff, and we took him to the precinct. So we found out that he wasn't 16. We found out he was 14.
Mm.
So his mother, we called her, you come get your son. She already had one son in Rikers Island already. She didn't really want to get the son. So eventually she came and got the son. So 2 days later, I'm on my days off. I get a call from the squad. And like, Barry. I said, yeah. I said, you remember that kid that you guys had grabbed the other day and stuff? I said, yeah, what's up? He had murdered somebody. Is up.
Wow.
He chased this person into a church and killed him.
Mm-hmm.
And it was over some drugs.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we did our due diligence and we finally grabbed the kid and stuff like that. And basically he got a slap on the wrist.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but every time this kid would see me in uniform, he would run the other way,
Oh wow.
you
Yeah.
know.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a whole bunch of stories. A whole bunch of stories. Is
Yeah.
what you
And
see,
so go ahead.
what you see in the book and what you hear in the book, there's much more, you
Wow.
know.
And so do you think
So,
it's going to be like a part two to this book so that we can hear like all of the stories? Because I doubt that you put all of the stories in there. Or did you?
well, it may, it may, so, it may,
It may. It may.
but I think the book is going to be, writing the book was a healing process for me.
Okay.
And it's gonna pull your emotional heartstrings.
Yeah.
It will,
Yeah.
because just talking about certain things that still get me emotional.
Mm-hmm.
Especially when it comes to my wife and
Yeah.
everything. That gets me emotional.
Mm-hmm.
You know, is
Mm-hmm.
so. But like I said, some of the EMS stories you haven't heard all of them, and all the police stories you haven't heard all of them.
Yeah.
Just gotta wait and see. But I think everybody would. I think everybody will enjoy the book.
Yeah.
You
I
know.
have so many
So,
people that I'm going to share this with, and even past this episode to share this episode with, because we are talking about several. Well, we're talking about two things in conjunction. We're talking about the absence of a father, and then the making of a detective, because that's your personal story into how you were led into this career path, but then how you've been a mentor, how you've been that strong voice for the kids who did not have fathers, and then what you have learned from, you know, being that servant leadership and also going into that detective. And so, Mr. Franklin, I cannot wait to dig more into the
Hmm.
book. I
Hmm.
cannot wait until, you know, I want to just say, let's just make it a bestseller. Like, I know you didn't just sit there and write the book and just say, hey, I just want to go into a bookstore. I know you want to be a bestseller, right? And
Yes,
so
yes, I do.
let's try to help him do that, Jazzy Crew. Make sure you purchase the book. Make sure you purchase In the Absence of My Father, The Making of a Detective. I am
I'm sorry. I just let you go on and say what you're gonna say.
I am not gonna say I
I
am
had to correct you sooner or later, but I'm trying not to be too much of a detective and stuff like that, being
you know,
authoritative
we're
and stuff.
gonna have a discussion outside of this podcast episode, okay? Is what I'm gonna say to you, okay? That's what we're gonna
Uh,
do. But yeah, but the framing of your answers to the questions definitely makes sense, and it lends itself to the work that you did as a detective. And then definitely I feel like that uncovering of your family roots on your father's side was a testament to, you know, some detective work that you did, personal work, and yeah, with your detective work, I'm pretty sure you gave a lot of families closure. I'm pretty sure that understanding the importance of forgiveness gave you closure on some tough cases that you had to cover, you know, and to
mhm.
do research on. And I definitely like I said, I definitely will be sharing your book. I'm thinking about a whole police department. Do you work any at all, like with the Lakeland PD?
No, I didn't. Basically, after I retired from like Nassau County, Long Island, basically it was like, I ain't doing no more police work. I'll give some advice and stuff, but I said my days of chasing people and stuff is over with. You know,
Because I feel like when you said like,
I do give good advice, but you know, like I said, different states got different laws and everything like that.
yeah,
I do belong to Polk County Fraternal Organization,
okay,
FOP Lodge.
okay,
Um, I belong to them. I still get in touch with my guardian people on Facebook, and you know, and
yes,
a lot of friends and stuff. Because I failed to realize, to tell you too, I was a transit cop also when they was three separate departments and
okay,
stuff. So
okay,
I started off as a transit from EMS to a transit cop. Then I rolled over to the city, and then I went to Nassau County because Nassau County was paying more than the city. You know, at
hmm,
the time they still do and
yeah,
everything, but you know, but that the cost of living is, you know, it's high. But
yeah,
you know, but that's it. So I moved to Florida. I retired April 2016. November 2016, I was down here,
yeah.
you
So
know.
that's
So
that's great.
sunshine thing and
I
stuff.
was gonna
But
say the whole that you know you're coming down, you're a snowbird, you're coming down and living the life. And hopefully you will not have to worry about any hurricanes or anything like that this
well,
season.
no, don't talk. Let them keep on going out to the ocean.
Facts. Please and thank you.
You
Please and thank
know?
you. So
Yeah,
yeah,
definitely.
do you feel like you have fulfilled your purpose?
I think so, but I think I'm not done yet, though. I really think, you know, and like I said, I think God's got other purposes for me,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah,
So, and that helps me to heal. That helps me to, go through what I'm going through. It's not easy, you
yeah,
know. And everybody's like, "Yeah, Barry, but sometimes I need a break, and you know, but it's just not easy,
yeah.
you
It's
know.
not. Being a caretaker is not. And Alzheimer's is a difficult disease to watch.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah,
and so I will definitely keep you and your wife in my prayers, your whole
thank you,
family. And I love hearing different stories from different people, understanding and hearing what they've gone through and how that has shaped who they are. And so I really do appreciate you taking this time out on the Jazzy Conversations with Jazz podcast to talk about your life, the journey that got you to this point. And we are definitely going to purchase the book at your website, on Walmart, at Amazon. And we're definitely going to subscribe and follow you on Instagram at barryo.franklin_books. And so, any closing words, sir, before we wrap this interview up?
Well, I appreciate you. I
Absolutely.
appreciate you being my first podcast.
Yes.
And I definitely, as time goes by, I hope you come to the event. I'm gonna make sure you get some information to the event.
Please do.
And I just tell people just to be strong,
Yeah.
and God's good. Yeah, he's good.
Absolutely. He is.
Definitely,
Well, thank you
definitely.
so much for that. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for your expertise in the knowledge and the subject matter of your book. Definitely pick up your copy, Jazzie Crew. All right. And so this wraps up episode 166 of the Jazzie Conversations with Jazz podcast. I am your host, Jasmine Jazz Bennett. Make sure you like, you follow, you subscribe over on IG, Facebook, YouTube, and your favorite podcast platform. Let's support Mr. Barry O. Franklin Sr. at his book launch. I'm pretty sure he'll sign some of your books if you are there in person. It's going down November 7th. Tell us the location one more time and the time.
Okay, it's called Tap That Beer House. It's on 1792 in the Publix Mall. It starts from 6:30 to 9 o'clock.
Awesome. Awesome. So thank you so much. And I hope you have an exceptional night. And those of you who are watching, remember, there is power in the comeback. I believe that you can come back from anything with God, using the right resources effectively and your willingness to do the necessary work. I will see you back here next Monday for episode 167. And I will definitely see you on November 8th at my live podcast event. Tickets are available on
Got one
eventbrite.com.
more thing to say to you.
Yes, go
Okay,
ahead.
they had to purchase tickets, but the tickets are free. So I'll make sure you have the information.
Thank you so much. And then likewise, let's task each other. So likewise, I got you too,
All right.
Barry. All right. All you have to do
All
is
right.
tell me to put you on the guest list. I got you.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. And so hang on after this for a second. All right. All right. So we will see
Okay.
you later, guys.